Will, calling from North Carolina. Hello, Will.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I've been calling in for the last few days, and this is my first time calling in as an atheist because my last call-ins have been kind of me working through deconstruction of my beliefs,
Wow.
specifically coming from Christianity. Yeah. And so this is a first for me, so I apologize. I have some questions for you guys about your prior beliefs. I'm assuming that you both used to be Christian. Is that true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was part of a Roman Catholic church back in the Dizzy.
Okay. Yeah. So I apologize if some of my questions might sound like kind of theisty because I'm only now kind of going back and reflecting on a lot of things that I never really thought of, and one of them were, I guess, kind of the perspective, or like a woman's perspective going through Christianity, because there are obviously a lot of questionable things in the Bible, for example, and then there's a lot of, I guess, quote-unquote traditions that are questionable in nature. And so one question that I really wanted to ask you guys, just from your perspective, was there anything about Christianity that made you feel like different or uncomfortable about being a woman? And I'm assuming that there are several. So, but just like one that stands out in particular, or one that, like if it's like misogyny in the Bible, or if it's like some way that people treated you. I'm just kind of curious if there is an experience like that you guys had to encounter.
Yeah, I feel like a couple that stuck out to me a lot is when I was a child, like, going through puberty. I remember being so embarrassed that I was like turning into a woman because it felt like, and I didn't understand it at the time. I literally remember a day where I was like sobbing because I was like weirdly ashamed of becoming a woman, and it didn't make sense to me at the time, and now looking back at it, I'm like, oh, it's because of how it's like always cover up, like your body's kind of like a shameful thing or something that causes men to like sin or lust or whatever it might be. And just a lot of purity culture stuff, but also I remember specifically hearing about a woman being assaulted, and I remember the men around me saying like, what was she wearing, or like she was wearing this or that. I also didn't think much of it as a child, and looking back I'm like, wow, a lot of the purity culture is it's like the worst thing it does is blame victims, especially when it comes to women experience any kind of things like that. And those are like two major things that stick out to me, and also just the everything that comes with purity culture, like the slut shaming of the first time I was ever called something like that. I think I was 13. I had never kissed a boy, and I was called a slut at church by this like youth pastor's son, and I didn't know what that was. I didn't even know what it meant. And so yeah, a lot of that definitely happened. How about you, Alyssa? Did you experience any of that?
I think it was definitely the purity culture stuff. Like, the show is called Chewed Gum because there's like a whole thing about nobody wants gum that's already been chewed, and it's supposed to discourage people from having sex with more than one person. I think the Christian view of sexuality and the shame that's associated with it is so, it like ripples out into so much of who women are. It devalues so much of our experience, especially because many women have children, and that having sex is a part of having children. And in the church, like your main goal is to like be married, have kids. And if that's not what you want to do, then you're having sex just for fun, or you're not having sex at all, which is what the church is sort of like proposing that you're doing. So that never sat right with me. And now I think I started to not really believe when I was in like high school, college, just because it didn't feel true to me. I was like, what? Like, it all felt like it was contradicting itself. And I was like, I just don't really believe that any of this happened. And now that I've gotten older, and I'm in the field that I'm in, which is sex and relationship coaching. And so I learned a lot about sex education, and I can see how much purity culture informed how I have dated and had sexual relationships in my life. It's actually like really frightening. And anytime I create any sort of content that is even remotely encouraging women having the freedom of choice in their sexuality, the comments that I get are absolutely horrifying. And 9 times out of 10, I go to their profile and there's a Bible verse in it. And it's like, it's this, like, I'm sure you've heard people say there's no hate like Christian love. And that's truly what it feels like. It feels like, even like if you take everything from the book alone, it's not great for women. Like, why is the Virgin Mary a virgin? Why does she have to be a virgin? What role does that play? What message are you giving people that this person, who I think there was some conversation that I've seen about her being like 14, allegedly. I don't know how anyone would know that, but regardless, when you're giving this message, like from really like the impotence of the entire story, the first message you hear is that Jesus was born from a virgin. Why? Why did that make him more pure? Why did that make her more pure? What was the function of including that in the story? And like, so from the start, I'm sort of like, well, what the fuck? And then you move forward in this whole story, and like you hear about, Mary Magdalene is a prostitute, and Jesus is revered for being friends with her because she's like an awful, dirty person, and he decided not to judge her. And it's like, now we've, I think, evolved enough past this where we can see people who are like creating adult entertainment on like OnlyFans or whatever, maybe they're porn stars, and we can see that they are normal people with normal lives. Many of them are married. Some of them have moved on past that career and have children. Like, they're really, the amount of shame that is involved in all of those, like those things, it's like embedded into these stories that it feels so like covert and it's like these undercurrents of messages and through all of it. And that's like the stories in the Bible. And there's so many more that I don't even know about, but the stories in the Bible. And then what's even worse is the people who have created a culture around Christianity that is not really supported by the Bible. Like, there's nothing in the Bible that explicitly says that gay people should not exist or gay people are wrong. Being gay is wrong. And somehow we have created this entire crusade. And so, it feels specific sometimes to women, but it also is kind of like, it feels like the message is, unless you are exactly the kind of person that Christianity wants you to be, you are wrong and bad. And I don't believe that many of the things that they're judging are an indication of your ethics or your morality. Like, I don't think that having sex with more than one person in your lifetime is an indication of a moral failing. Like, there is no morality connected to that. Funny enough, what's connected to morality in the Bible is being wealthy. And what we've done, at least in the US, is glorify people who are wealthy. We've given them, specifically Republicans who talk about being Christian all the time. Like, that's the political party that peddles Christianity. And all they do is make space for people who are already wealthy. And in reality, like, those are the people that are in the Bible are apparently not the ones who are going to make it. Isn't the quote like, it would be easier for a camel to go through the needle or the eye of a needle than for a wealthy person to make it into heaven, something along those lines.
Interesting.
Right. So like,
yeah.
So like,
Oh, sorry.
It's the text, and then it's also the interpretation of the text. I have issues with both.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Thank you both for that. That was a lot to unpack, but I'm appreciative of that. That was, I think that, I mean, I think everything that you guys said made complete sense to me. And a lot of it is stuff that I may have, like, I feel like I may have had issues with in the past, but I just kind of never really thought about it. And I certainly never got a woman's perspective on it. So that was really insightful to hear about. I think I especially, what clicked with me was when you guys were talking about this like idea of, or this problem of purity, and that kind of having a negative pressure on, I guess, other people as well, but women in particular, at least in the Bible. And I think what always kind of stood out to me was that story of Adam and Eve, just going back to Genesis, where it's like Eve is like this object of temptation rather than kind of being seen as a person. It's more kind of like, I guess, a plot device for Adam. And that's something that I really never even thought about until after, like, or until my deconstruction process. So yeah, I mean, I really have nothing more to add to that, because that's your guys' perspective, and I'm just really glad that I got to hear that, because a lot of that I had never really considered. So thank you for that. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that Adam and Eve story is so interesting because I didn't think about it really hard when I was a Christian, and looking back, kind of the whole story is kind of like obviously sets women up to seem like they're not good at decision making or leading, and that kind of gives men an excuse to build like a patriarchal system because women just can't make the right choices, is like kind of how they set it up, even though Adam also apparently sinned. But after leaving Christianity, I found it so interesting that part of Eve's punishment was her husband ruling over her, like literally using sexism as a punishment from God, was like a wild thing to come to terms with that I did not ever bother to notice when I was a Christian. But it makes so much sense, like how the story's written, setting it all up to make women the I don't know, inferior gender, or the gender that can't lead as well. Yeah, it's very interesting to look at it once you're out of it, because you're like, well, damn, that's really messed up to make sexism a punishment for a sin. That's super weird.
Yeah, I agree. I think another thing that stood out to me was I didn't always go to church, but there were a few times that I did go, and I remember there being this there was this pastor that was, I think, reading out this passage, which was, and I honestly can't remember like word for word or even paraphrase what the passage was, but I know that it was specifically talking about, I believe, like women should be like quiet in the church or something like that. And there was this, like, I guess, it was interesting to me because I was like, why? It was such a contrast. It was like a whiplash kind of feeling. Like, there was great community. I was really having a great time, and all of a sudden there was like, and here's this really sexist thing that we're just going to say about women. And then they, I guess, tried to spin it into this interpretation that made it sound not so bad, which didn't really resonate with me. But
Yeah.
I just thought that was interesting, that there's like that kind of, I mean, maybe like intellectual tap dance around what seems like a very literal statement in the Bible. So I just thought that was interesting.
It's interesting because Christianity, I mean, they, like, a lot of them claim, they have objective morality, but they a lot of times have to kind of change their morality over time to stay like relevant, I guess, or stay where people would want to like continue with them, because if they, you're right, like it's just like them, you know, putting their own spin on it. But if they were to take the Bible literally, like a lot of evangelicals claim they do, they would have to stick to that. But they know that if they stuck to that, it would be way more unpopular and a lot more women would leave. And more women are leaving in general than men, just because of like the sexism. But yeah, I just think that's funny, kind of how that stuff changes over time, because it has to, for them to keep younger people in it.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. That actually, I think that kind of brings me to my next question, which is kind of, wouldn't say the opposite of what we're talking about, but kind of the opposite view of looking at this, which I wanted to ask, like, do you think it is possible for like women to keep their faith without being subject to these like misogynistic issues? And I'm not saying that they should necessarily, because obviously I'm on the side now of deconverting, but do you think it is possible for women to like remain Christian without being subject to these issues? And obviously there are lots of Christian women, but that doesn't mean that they aren't subject to these problems, and they could not even be directly aware that they're subject to these problems. So I was just curious what your like answer or thoughts on that would be.
I think it's like, if you're someone who's taking the Bible seriously, that would be impossible, just because of like how the Bible is written. And I know there are, you know, progressive Christians, like super progressive Christians, that I really, really do appreciate. But I do think that sometimes involves ignoring certain things in the Bible, or, you know, saying that you're comfortable with not caring about certain parts of the Bible. But if you're taking like the Bible in general as like the word of God, like how some Christians do, I don't think there's any way you can escape that part of it. What do you think?
I agree. I
That
think
makes sense.
You basically have to cherry pick the information. Like, again, my mom is very religious. I have no interest in deconverting her. However, she has a Bible study group, and they meet every week for most of the year, and it is specifically for women. And there is a guidebook that they use to like navigate specific stories in the Bible that are specifically for women. So I think that like, if you kind of see what you want to see in this situation, and so a lot of the times when we have conversations with people who are theists, we boil it down to, you know, well, I have faith, like that person has faith, a theist has faith, and at some point many atheists are just looking for the truth, which means I can't cherry pick the information. I don't want a separate guide that's going to interpret the stories in a way that is favorable to me staying a part of this thing that feels very clearly not made for me, and not in favor of me having like choices and free will and whatever. So yeah, I think it's just a lot of cherry picking that would have to be involved.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess that makes sense, because I mean, there's not really much logic in like adopting a worldview and then only taking some elements of that out, and then still saying that that's the entire encompassment of your worldview. I think that's
even like some of the part that I think is kind of interesting is for people who cherry pick. It's like, what is the value you're trying to take from this? If the value is, I like some of Jesus's messages, okay, but then maybe the Bible is a storybook, and you learned really great messages from that story. what is the purpose then
Right.
of making it into a situation where you are going to church and you're donating to a church and you are subscribing to this faith? And I've heard people say before on this on this show, on this channel, that part of the reason that they want to keep their faith is because it gives them a like a moral compass to have the like. People will say, well, how do you know like what's morally and ethically right if you don't have the 10 commandments? And I'm like, are you asking me how I know it's wrong to kill someone? What are you talking about? I think we can kind of figure it out. But like realistically, even if like you use the 10 commandments as a way to give you some sort of moral compass, great. Like if that is meaningful to you, sure. But it doesn't mean that you believe that there is a, you know, to use Jimmy's phrasing, I don't think he made it up, but Sky Daddy that is watching everything that you're doing, that you have to like be on your knees and worship every week. That's a whole different thing. Like I've also had this conversation with theists when they call, where they'll say, well, part of their argument for why they believe the Bible is true is because it's been around for a really long time and it's whatever. And, you know, we have all of these stories written by people. And I bring up to them, like, Scientology is based on a book also. So what's the difference between Scientology that's based on a book and is a completely different religion and Christianity that is based on a book? And at least with Scientology, we know who wrote it. And we know like, he was a fantasy writer. We have more information. But with the Bible, like, anyone could have written it. And as far as we know, the people who wrote it from years and years, decades, sometimes even after these events allegedly happened. And we've all seen how like telephone works. And these could have been men who put their minds together and were like, I think we can actually leverage this in our favor. And that's not a shocking thing to me, because we see people, human beings, do that all the time. So, you know.
Yeah, I think, well, what's interesting when you're bringing up morality, the issue of morality, objective morality, is that I probably was that caller several times, not literally, but in the past few days, that was definitely the issue. One of the main issues that I was struggling with in my deconstruction was trying to reconcile the idea of there being no like universal standard or objective morality, and kind of using that as, you know, as a premise for my belief in God. And I'm still working through that. Like I still have questions. Those will be for another call in, but I appreciated you saying that, because that's definitely something that I wrestled with, and that I'm, you know, still thinking about and trying to figure out. But I agree with what you're saying, that it's not that I don't think that having that religious doctrine, I guess, is necessarily the answer to that question. Whereas in the past, I definitely would have said otherwise. So yeah, thank you for that. I had one more question to ask you guys, but I think you kind of already answered it. I'll go ahead and ask it anyway. I was going to ask, what do you think the biggest threat to women today is in regards to Christianity? But it sounds like, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong on this, it sounds like the answer to that would just be like self-esteem issues and you know, pressuring women to think about themselves in a certain kind of way as like more of a sinful sexual object rather than a person who's just like anyone else. That would be my impression of what your answer to that would be, but I'm curious to hear what your actual answers are.
The main thing I think I focus on now is how it impacts us on like the biggest level, like through government, and how like that purity culture literally starts to go into our laws and stuff when it comes to reproductive rights and stuff. I think that can get really scary really fast, because like we've seen, well, first of all, I just believe in reproductive rights, period, but we've seen women literally die because they couldn't get the help that they needed due to this like weird idea surrounding purity. culture and like and then, you know, being anti-abortion and stuff. That's like my biggest issue is like how it's actually like impacting people's real lives. And people always say, you know, like no one's forcing you to be Christian, but it's like you're forcing and in this case like women to, you know, live by your specific values and morals. And you know, I know there's even laws that are like they're attempting to pass when it comes to like people I'm not going to be able to explain this right, just like people getting certain things if they are a single mother, or they want to make it kind of harder for, you know, single moms to get along, and then also make divorces harder to get and like stuff like that. Like a lot of that comes back down to purity culture, and that's going to impact people's real lives and in a really horrible way that takes away people's autonomy. And I feel like that's what I'm most worried about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agreed.
for sure.
And it feels a lot like it's exactly what Taylor's saying, and it also feels like it's an illusion of choice. Like that it's so frustrating. Like they basically create an illusion of choice for women who believe, where they're like if you talk to women who are like super devout, they'll be like, I can do whatever I want actually, and what I want to do is submit to my husband and have kids and not have a job and never get an education beyond high school, and that's my choice. And okay, like I guess, you know, obviously for some women that is their choice, but when you've been indoctrinated to believe that that is like the height of what you can achieve, it is an illusion of choice. It's an illusion of free will, because you were brought up in an environment where you didn't think that there was anything beyond that. Like you didn't consider life beyond that, so it's an illusion of choice.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, man, that's another thing that I don't think I've actually thought about before. I guess gaslighting would be this idea that, yeah, if you're tricked into thinking that you're making the choice that's making you feel bad or holding you back, yeah, that is definitely, that is a really big problem. Wow. Again, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna add, people in chat were helping me out when I was trying to say about different things they're trying to pass that would impact like women from kind of the purity culture view, was like the um Tennessee, someone said Tennessee just had a case where a pregnant person was denied prenatal care because of the doctors disagreed. And if I remember correctly, it's because the woman wasn't married, but she had kids
Yeah.
with somebody unmarried. And then the other one was increasing taxes on single mothers, like just weird stuff to not allow, like, to keep women in marriages and only, you know, only be able to make certain decisions, basically making it harder for them to leave situations or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's wow. I'm trying to write down everything you guys are saying, because this is a really, honestly, a big part of my kind of deconversion. I would say that I'm already like most of the way through. Like I said before, and this is why I appreciate you guys so much. Like I still have a lot of questions that I just want to, you know, do my due diligence with and go through, that have, you know, questions that I've had as a theist, and I just want to kind of clean out the closet and just, you know, and just go through all these thoughts that I had. So I really appreciate both your like time and input on this and your perspective. I think I might just kind of close out with that, because I already have a lot written down that I want to think about and look into. So I think that might be where I'm comfortable leaving it for now, unless you guys have anything else you want to add to that.
I just want to say I think it's really good that you're deconstructing this part of it, because you'd be surprised how many men leave religion but are still very misogynistic and sexist, and I don't even know if they're aware that they need to deconstruct that part or aware of like why they're still that way even after leaving religion. So I think it's really great that you're doing this part of it, which I think is really important. And it seems like I've run into a decent amount of men who have missed that part when deconstructing religion. So I think it's good that you're doing this and, asking women about it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Will.
Yeah. Honestly. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, I just wanted to say thank you for doing that as well.
Yeah. I didn't even really think about this until I saw the title of the broadcast, and I was like, wow, that like kind of sparked a whole new thought process. So like, honestly, and again, I'm like, I'm starting to discover, and I'll just say this, I'm starting to discover that there are a lot of questions that I never even realized that I should ask. And, that alone, I think speaks a lot to kind of how I've been living my life. And so I'm really just trying to change that and question that. I think that you guys are doing a great job, and this has been a really big help in my kind of questioning journey, I guess is a way to put it. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate all of you who are doing this. So yeah, it's great.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you, Will. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you guys.
And you can call back anytime.
Great. Will do. All right. You guys take care.
Bye.
You too. Goodbye.
Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Did you know we saw what you were doing when you watched it?
We saw all of it. All of it. All of it.
So you're going to want to pay us hush money over at patreon.com/calltheline, where you can buy our silence and watch our patron exclusive podcast.